Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ki-dong Kim. I'm postdoctoral fellow of Korea program at Park, and I'm also postdoc at Stanford Next Asia Policy Lab, SNAPL. So it's an honor for me to introduce Professor Yusaku Horiuchi. So let me introduce him. Yusaku Horiuchi is a professor of government and a Mitsui professor of Japanese studies at Dartmouth College. His research utilizes experimental designs and statistical methods to address diverse empirical questions in political science, particularly focusing on foreign global public opinion, Japanese politics, diversity, elections, and political methodology. He has published widely in top political science journals, such as American Political Science Review, American Journal of Political Science, General Politics, Political Analysis, and Science Advances, and authored 2 books. His research draws on data from Japan and other countries, such as Australia, Israel, South Korea, the United Kingdom, and the United States. At Dartmouth, he teaches courses on quantitative political analysis, data visualization, and the politics of Japan. He holds an MA in International and Development Economics from Yale and a PhD in Political Science from MIT. He has also held visiting appointments at Keio University, Australian National University, and MIT. So today, he's going to talk about democratic backsliding. The title, The Democratic Backsliding Damages Favorable US Image Among the Global Public, Implications for the Asia-Pacific Region. Please join me in welcoming Professor Yusaku Horiuchi.
Okay, thank you so much for your nice invitation, and thank you for coming to this lunchtime seminar. So just a minute, where's my slide? Okay. Yeah, so I'm Yusaku Horiuchi. And then it's nice to be able to present my one of my recent research, and it's still not published. And then so I would be delighted to receive some feedback so that we can improve this. Okay, so this is a paper. I see some echoes, but is it okay? Yeah. So this is a paper with my longtime collaborator Benjamin Goldsmith at ANU. And Kelly Matouche, and then Katie Powers. And then the title is Democratic Backsliding and Foreign Public Opinion. But I just want to briefly, this is a talk, just a standard paper format, introduction, theories, hypothesis, research, and results. But for this particular talk, I added Japan, South Korea, and India. And I want to talk about these 3 countries more specifically. And then, of course, I want to conclude. But first of all, I wanted to introduce my broader research interest, and that is the beginning. This is, of course, 9/11, and then I got PhD in 2001 June at MIT, and then soon after that I left US and I went to Singapore, and then I started my academic career as an assistant professor at the National University of Singapore, and then just a few months later, 9/11. And at that time, I got to know another new assistant professor, Benjamin Goldsmith, in the same department. And even before 9/11, we started talking about some potentially interesting research ideas, because we were the only 2 who did and who still do statistical research and are interested in international relations more generally. And then 9/11 happened. Okay? And then the French newspaper said, we are all Americans. And then suddenly, people, leaders and the general public around the world pay attention to the US, and then initially supported. Okay, but then we thought, what types of people are more likely to have a favorable attitude toward the US compared to the others? That was the beginning of our long time, like 2-3 decades collaborations. And then we first published a paper from Journal of Conflict Resolutions, but these past two decades, lots of things happened. So our collaboration continued, but we are constantly interested in what people around the world think about the United States. Okay, and interestingly, this is actually something we discovered after 9/11. Is before 9/11, there were, of course, so many studies connecting public opinion and the policies. Okay, but public opinion and policy linkage is usually within that particular country. Okay, so what people outside that country think about another country was not much studied in comparative politics and international relations, particularly about the US. Okay, so we thought, what, not just the domestic, what US American people think about the US, but in addition, what people around the world think about the US should be studied. Okay. Then, of course, what happened was the January 6th. Okay, and then naturally we thought, okay, the unfortunate thing happened, but this is another time that we have to study what people around the world think about the United States. Okay, so that's the beginning, and then there are lots of newspapers around the world, of course, talked about the January 6th, and many leaders expressed some concerns. For example, this one, distressed to see news about rioting and violence in Washington, D.C. The Indian Prime Minister Modi, orderly and peaceful transfer of power must continue. The democratic process cannot be allowed to be subverted through unlawful protest. This is just one example, but so many leaders around the world sent some similar messages. Okay, so that's the background. So the questions, general question is, does democratic backsliding, if such thing of course exists, affect foreign public opinion about the US? 2 years ago, and then also this year, I attended like Midwest Political Science Association and American Political Science Association, but particularly last year, I think last year at Midwest, one of the most popular topics discussed in panels was democratic backsliding. And then there are so many panels with the term democratic backsliding. And then I checked all of them, okay? But all of them are about democratic backsliding and the political behavior, public opinion in that country. Okay? Mostly the US, but also democratic backsliding in other countries. So again, just like what we realized right after 9/11, we thought, well, this is something important. We need to study what are the international consequences, implications of the US democratic backsliding. Is there any effect on public opinion? Okay, and then more specifically, how does information about the problems, issues in American democracies affect US soft power and perceived international status among the citizens of American partners? Okay. And then we started collecting data. But through the data collections, we got some comment, and then we added additional important question, which is something I wanted to discuss in the second half, specifically in the context of Japan, South Korea, and India, which is, do foreign publics adjust their policy preferences for important foreign policy issues to the United States? Right. So these are the big question and some specific questions that we address in this paper. Okay. So what are the contributions? First, we as I already noted, democratic institution, democratic backsliding, but we want to study these democratic backsliding in particular in the global international politics, okay, which we think is not much studied. The second one is soft power and international status. This is not specifically about specifically about this paper, but I myself and this team of researchers have been discussing how we can operationalize, measure soft power and international status. So we do another attempt to measure perceived soft power and international status based on multinational survey experiments. And then the third one is relatively new area for us, but not just understanding, the favorable, unfavorable attitude or approval, disapproval of the leadership of other countries, but what are the policy consequences? Okay, we don't measure the policy itself, but we can measure the policy preferences. Is there any change in the policy preferences toward the United States? Okay. So the series, soft power and international status, those who are familiar with the literature of international relations, of course, know these two concepts, but soft power and international status are quite interesting areas of research and becoming more relevant. And then traditionally, in the traditional like textbooks of international relations didn't talk much about those things, but this is becoming quite important in the literature of international relations and also the real world. Okay? And then some of you, or many of you, know the concept of soft power. Okay? Initially proposed by Professor Joseph Nye, the soft power, and his definition is countries' ability to influence outcomes through attraction, not hard power, threat, or inducement, including monetary incentives, but through the attractions. That can change the policy behavior, public opinion, and then policy behavior, and then international outcomes. So that's the soft power. Okay? And then another interesting literature is international status. So that is definition is country's relative ranking, standing or position in the global hierarchy. Okay? And then the study suggests that the leaders care about the international status, and then also the public also assess foreign policy attitude and develop foreign policy attitudes and develop foreign policy attitude and assess the policies based on international status of the targeted countries. Okay, so these are the broader theoretical frameworks that we use in this research. But more specifically, we present some hypotheses. Number one is democracy matters for soft power. Okay, and then Professor Joseph Nye said the U.S. has some soft power resources. Okay, meaning some things can be the resources for the U.S. to exercise soft power. Okay, and then in his book, he says stable institution is one of the most important feature of the United States that can attract people around the world. Okay, right. And so more easy another way to say is democracy matters. Democracy is a key political value central to the U.S. identity. So the Gideon actually presented interesting research yesterday, and then I made some comments as a discussion. But U.S. as a democracy is a key shared values. Okay? When leaders meet, like I'm from Japan, so when political leaders from Japan meets political leader from the U.S. president and Japanese prime minister, without exception, I actually checked, always, okay, joint statements, they mention shared values. Okay, we democracies, we countries share the democratic values and freedoms. That's something always they say. Okay, so the democracy is important, at least at the level of leaders, as long as we believe their statements. Okay, and then a public research after research suggests democracy does matter. So that actually means, interestingly, after January 6th, the global public promotes, before this, global, and then given this, the United States has promoted the democratization. Okay? But if democracy is perceived to be backsliding, that actually may change the way people see the United States. Okay? So hypothesis number one is exposure to information about the backsliding of American democracy deteriorates the positive image of the United States among citizens in foreign states. That's hypothesis number one. Okay. Now, international status. Okay, studies suggest shared democracy once again increases a country's status. Okay? If people are given the information that that country is a democracy, then relatively that country is perceived as higher compared to the non-democracy. Okay? And then many Americans also think that the democracy is important, okay, for US to maintain and develop the prestige in international stage. Okay? So given this, Okay, backsliding. Okay, exposure to information about the backsliding of American democracy has a negative effect on the perceived status of the US among citizens in foreign states. So hypotheses are relatively straightforward. Okay, any questions so far? So the question simple, and I think hypothesis is relatively simple. Okay, but now research design. Okay, we spent like more than a year to collect. So we did study 1, study 2, study 3. Okay, I hope you will not suggest that we should do study 4, study 5, study 6, but feel free to suggest if you think we need to do more. Okay, so the study 1. So the first we started collecting the responses, the data in November 2022. Okay. Then we ended up collecting almost 7,295 responses, about 800 per country. And then the countries included these countries. Okay. Now, so I didn't write in the paper and also in this slide, but the choice of country is unfortunately not relevant to this particular topic. Okay. And then the reason why we chose this country, including the United States, was because I got a relatively large amount of research grants from Dartmouth College to study people's attitudes toward refugee resettlement. Okay. These 10 countries are the top 10 countries accepting UN-sponsored refugees for resettlement. Okay. And that's another paper I'm working on, and I have a series of papers about refugee resettlement. And then we wanted to study 10-country large-scale multinational survey experiments to understand how much people's support for resettlement change depending on information environment. But then we got the money like 2019, but because of the COVID, we had to stop the research because countries are essentially stopped accepting refugees. So we postpone, and then January 6th. So we decided to add additional component to the survey of this 10 country to study people's attitudes toward the January 6th. I mean, well, I said January 6th, but more generally, democratic backsliding in the United States. Okay. So the treatment, it's a randomized experiment. I hope many of you are familiar with this randomized experiment. It's very similar. It's respondents randomly divided into control group and a treatment group. Okay, and then only those who are assigned to that treatment group are given information about US democracy. Okay, and we did many pre-tests, and then we ended up making this using this particular treatment. Okay. News report, democracy is declining in the United States. The United States has been labeled a backsliding democracy. Here's what a new international think tank report says about the state of US democracy. Okay. And then dot points. Okay. And then in order to increase the strength of this particular treatment, after this, we actually ask a question about each dot point. And then we say this is a treatment booster. Okay? We encourage them to fully understand the content. Okay, and this is a kind of a executive summary of the report that people are often exposed to. So there is a certain degree of external validity. Okay, and then just a two group. Okay, and then outcome questions. We follow standard questions used in the existing literature. So soft power, please tell me if you have a very favorable, somewhat favorable, somewhat unfavorable, and a very unfavorable opinion of the United States. This is a question used in the Pew Research Center and many other studies. Okay, but international status, it's slightly long, but we use a slider scale. So think about how much status, parentheses, respect, prestige, you believe the United States likely has compared with all other countries in the world. Please tell us the number you think best represent United States status relative to other countries in the world from 1 to 100. Okay, 1 low, 100 high. Okay, so that's the measure of our outcome questions. I will show you the results later, but then we found some issues. We presented the results, we got some comments, but we found some challenges. So we decided to do another study, but the study 2 is a kind of a preliminary study for the bigger study 3. Okay, and then that's July 2023. Okay, and then we got 1,500 responses. Country, we decided to use New Zealand. Okay, why New Zealand? Because we found the clearest results in study 1 in New Zealand. Okay, so and then New Zealand actually is quite interesting. Of course, they're not important for the US, but there are quite interesting policy discussions relevant to the New Zealand's position with regard to the United States. So we did this. Okay, and then some of the challenges from study 1. One is I showed you the treatment. Okay? The US is backsliding democracy. But when we presented, some people commented quite, I think, reasonably that people may be responding just the negative information about the US. US, something strange is going on. Okay? US has some issues, but they don't pay attention to democracy itself. Okay? So just the negative information, not about negative information about the US democracy. Okay, so what we did is we decided to split respondents into 3 groups: control group, treatment group 1, treatment group 2. Treatment 1, same. But the treatment 2, we added another treatment condition which looks so similar, but about the economy. Okay, new report: the economy is declining in the United States. Okay? The United States is experiencing economic trouble. Here's what a new international think tank report says about the state of the US economy. Okay? So this is like a placebo treatment. We don't expect this to have an effect on people's attitude, like soft power, and then well, international status maybe, but we wanted to test the effects of information about democratic backsliding itself. So well, we decided to add this additional treatment. Yes.
So control group doesn't read anything.
Control group doesn't read anything. Yeah, I know the experiments. Some people add some weird treatment in order to have the same, the length. But my preference is just a pure control. I know that this is a debate. Yes. Okay. So another challenge. Okay. Another challenge is favorability. Some people said. Okay. Again, quite reasonably. Okay. Favorability is an indirect measure of soft power. Okay. And then this is also the paper that Ben Goldsmith and I discussed in another paper. But when we talk about soft power, okay, the researchers tend to use favorable, unfavorable attitude. And then when attitudes are, when people have strong, quite positive attitude for the United States, then we researchers and students tend to think that that country have a strong soft power. The US has a strong power in that particular country. But strictly speaking, that is actually not the definition of soft power. It's just the attitude. Okay? It's just the soft power resources. Okay? Soft power becomes powerful in international relations when people who have favorable attitude change their policy preferences toward the United States, right? So that US can observe some policy changes in favor of the United States. That's the power. Okay, so we still don't measure actual policy decisions. That's actually what we tried to do in our JOP paper, Ben Goldsmith. But we at least measure some specific policy preferences in the targeted country. So this is the New Zealand. So we ask prioritize economic relationship with the United States or China. Okay. Increase support for Ukraine at US urging. And then another issue is support for joining Australia, UK, US, the group, the security alliance, kind of alliance, and then whether or not New Zealand joins was and it still is a huge issue. Okay, so these are the policy relevant questions. Okay, so not just favorability, but how much people's attitude toward the policy areas change. Okay, and as I said, study 2 was pretest. and then it went well. So we decided to do study 3. Okay, and then as in study 3, we decided to we did this year February, and then about 1,000 country, and then this time we decided to focus on Asia Pacific, Indo-Pacific, Japan, India, South Korea. Okay, why these 3 countries? Maybe I don't need to say, but important partners in Indo-Pacific regions. Okay. And then we also added more policy relevant questions. Okay. Same question, priority with US or China, support for Quad, okay, the security dialogue between Japan, Australia, and United States, and India. Okay. And then we also added, similar to the case of New Zealand, we added one country-specific question for each country. I will explain these questions later, but I wanted to show you the general results first. Okay. Now, overall effect of US soft power. Okay, we ask that question: favorable, unfavorable attitude toward the United States, and then the black. This is the histogram, and then black, the bars are for people in the treatment group. Okay, gray, people in the control group. Okay, and you may see that the histogram, this distribution, black to gray, shift a bit left, so became more unfavorable. Okay, and then we assign 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and we took the average. People in the control group average 2.69, and then people in the treatment group average 2.558. So the average favorable attitude actually decreased. And then, as you know, as you can see, the confidence intervals are definitely not overlapping. So this effect is quite significant, right? So the result of hypothesis testing 1, exposure to information about backsliding American democracy deteriorates the positive image of among the US, among citizens in foreign states. Conclusion, empirically supported. Okay. US status. Okay, this time we used a slider scale. So we made kernel density curve. Okay, again, black one for treatment group and a gray one for control group. Okay, there is a slight shift. Okay, but again, we calculated the average score. Okay, and then average score changed from 60.4.48 to 61.67. Okay, so again, the treatment has an expected negative and statistically significant effect. By the way, some of you may think that this is a small change, okay, but it's actually small, but not that small. Okay, many of the experiments almost no move if you make a histogram or density curve like this, but we see, clearly see some shift. Okay, and then the magnitude of the change is like 3 to 4 points. Okay, and given this, I'm not showing this, but given the standard deviation of the variable, this is actually not a small effect. So hypothesis 2, let me read again. Exposure to information about the backsliding American democracy deteriorates the perceived status of the US among citizens in foreign states. Supported. Okay, hypothesis 2 is also supported. Okay, we also checked effects by country. Okay, and then soft power effects, and then effects on soft power, so effects on international status, and then sorted by the magnitude of the effect. Okay, as you see, many of these point estimates are negative. Okay, except one, Netherlands, positive, slightly positive. Many of them are negative, and then at least half of them are statistically significant, highlighted in red. Okay, so it's not just one country. Generally, the effects are negative, and then tend to have some significant effects. Okay. What about the democracy versus economy? Our expectation is it has effect on democracy, but not economy. And that's exactly what we found. Right? So the treatment group who are exposed to information about the US democracy is declining compared to the control group. Effect is minus 0.10. Okay, but when compared to the control group, people in experiment economy treatment, US economy is declining. effect is much smaller, 0.03, and it's not statistically significant. Okay. We also examine the mechanisms. We ask a range of questions. The US as democracy, it's almost like a factual manipulation check question, but as we expected, people who are assigned to the democratic backsliding group compared to the control group, they thought US is not democracy. Okay? US government is stable, also negative and statistically significant. US getting stronger, okay, also negative and statistically significant. Interestingly, but whether or not the democracy generally as preferable, no effect. And then also other countries should be like the US, no effect. So these are many ways to interpret, but I think these results make sense. It's very US specific attitude change linked to the democratic backsliding in the United States. Okay, so the backsliding has significant implication for important aspect of the US image. Policy preferences, question? Yes. Yes. No effect. No effect, except US as getting stronger, I think. That makes sense. US economy is getting weak, right? But it doesn't have effect on US is democracy or not. Yeah, we have, as you know, I like to make visualizations. So I made lots of graphics. Yeah, so that's one of the figures in the appendix, yes. So the policy preferences, this is the main, one of the most interesting findings. So we ask a range of policy questions, except this support for AUKUS New Zealand. They are all not statistically significant. And then on average, okay, there are some positive, some negative, on average around 0. I want to talk more about this in the context of Japan, India, and South Korea. Okay, so American ability to achieve cooperation may not be influenced by the information about democratic backsliding, but that's question mark. We need to do more research. Okay, so Japan, South Korea, India, okay, quite particularly interesting. Okay, and because these countries are US partners, and then the East Asia is a matter of concern for many people. And then when something happens in Korean Peninsula or in Taiwan, then US needs cooperation. It needs to work with Asian countries, and the countries in Asia need to work together. Okay? And then that's I used to study, and I still do lots of different research, but that's actually becoming one of my core research interests because that's something I personally care a lot. So that's one reason I wanted to focus on Asian countries, and including my home country, Japan. So policy questions, I want to show all of these policy questions more specifically, okay, because this should be relevant for your interpretation of our results. Okay, number one, all three countries. Priority. Sometimes Japan, South Korea, India, one of them, must make trade-offs when building relationship with other countries. Do you think that Japan, South Korea, India should prioritize economic relationship with the United States or with China? That's priority question. Quad, okay? And then Japan and India are the members. Okay, so for this country, we said the United States is urging Japan or India to strengthen its commitment to Quad. The US is a member of this group alongside Australia and India or Japan. The countries agreed to consult each other during crisis and hold annual military exercises. Do you support or oppose Japan's, India's full commitment to Quad? Okay. We also wanted to ask this similar question to South Korea, but South Korea is not a member of Quad. So the question is slightly different. United States may provide a future opportunity for South Korea to join the Quad. The US is a member of this group alongside Australia, India, and Japan. The countries agreed to consult each other during crisis and hold annual military exercise. That sentence is exactly the same. Do you support or oppose South Korea joining the Quad? Okay. So that's two questions. One is about priorities, particularly economy, China or US. This is more politics, military. Okay. cooperation with other countries together, the US as a key, of course, member or not. But we then ask one specific question in each country. Okay, the policy issues important in each country are of course changing, but as of designing the survey, we tried to choose the issue that was salient and heatedly debated, and the issue that US think as important. Because the US, in order to check the soft power thing, we need to focus on the issue area that US cares, right? Japan, of course, Taiwan. Okay, the United States and Japan are making plans to defend Taiwan against a potential attack by China. That's after Biden clearly mentioned the US will help Taiwan defend Taiwan. Okay, despite US strategic ambiguity positions, official positions. So we said this in that particular global context. Do you support or oppose Japan making a public statement committing to take actions against any Chinese aggression toward Taiwan? 2, Korea. Okay. United States encouraging South Korea to step up its engagement in military security issues in Indo-Pacific region. The Chip 4 Alliance. Okay. With US, Japan, Taiwan is part of this because microchips are important for military technology. The group aims to reduce China's central position in the global semiconductor supply chain. Do you support or oppose South Korea joining the Chip 4 Alliance? Question mark. India. Okay, this was a huge issue. United States is urging India to reduce its weapons purchases from Russia in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Do you support or oppose reducing India's arms purchase from Russia? Okay, now results. Okay, I already showed some of the results, but I just remade the figure focusing on these 3 countries. The top 2, favorability and perceived status. These are 95% confidence interval, but I changed the color by 90%. So they're not corresponding to 95% the significant at 5%. The color responds to 10% significant, but the point is favorability perceived status shift and then became negative. So people's attitude toward the United States changed, negative. Okay, India status didn't change. We don't have a good explanation for this, but that's what we found. But more importantly, compared to the top 2, the rest, priority US or China, support for the Quad, and then a country-specific effect, no effect. Okay, I think this is quite interesting result. Okay, because let me conclude. First of all, domestic threats to liberal democratic norms degrade foreign public opinion about the United States. So people's attitude when people are exposed to democratic backsliding, people in those US allies and the partners think that US is less attractive, okay, less favorable attitude, and then the US status goes down. Okay, and then the literature and the common discussions, debates suggest that such change in the public attitude should have certain policy change. That's not a good for the US. But we don't know. We need to do more research, but democratic backsliding may not hamper strategic US foreign policy priorities that require cooperation from democratic allies. Okay, one potential reason, particularly in China and Japan and South Korea, the issues are real. Okay, and then it's not hypothetical. Okay, and then they have some declining, deteriorated image of the United States, but when it comes to the national security, they may be more realistic or pragmatic. Okay, so their policy positions with regard to the US cooperation may not be influenced. But that's what we found, but what perhaps we need to do in study 4, study 5, never ending, but we need to publish. So I think I should finish my talk, and then I want to get some comments from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing your super interesting paper. Then let's have a Q&A session. So if you have any question, please raise your hand.
Fascinating talk, and what a great project. I have 2 questions that I wanted to ask you, because I guess if you think about the soft power or the international status theory. You're theorizing here would be that your treatment reduces perceptions of the United States, which in turn has consequences for policy. So I have the two questions that I have are first about the first branch of that graph, and then the second about the second part of that graph. Okay, on the first about whether information about backsliding hurts the image of the United States. You think like if people in other countries already knew that the United States was experiencing democratic backsliding, January 6th and others, and kept it top of mind when evaluating the United States, then the treatment that you present in the survey, in theory, shouldn't really have an effect. And yet you find an effect. And so I was wondering how you interpret it. Is your thought that people in other countries don't know about US backsliding, and so you're informing them for the first time? Is it that they know about it, but it's not at the top of their head, and we should interpret your treatment as a salience treatment that makes it a higher consideration for them? So that's the first question, is about how to interpret the treatment effect that you do find. The second, I was wondering if you would go so far as to interpret your data as evidence against soft power theory, because you're finding that your treatment reduces the US image, but that doesn't translate into cooperation with the United States. So Nye and others who write about soft power wrong, thinking that soft power is important for the United States in getting the policies that it wants.
So the number one, initially when we first presented this design, actually pre-analysis plan at APSA like 3 years ago. Our treatment was specifically about January 6th. But we decided not to take that approach because number one, people knew the January 6th. That was the huge news everywhere. Okay. But another one is we wanted to study the impact of democratic backsliding, eliminating the image of the Trump. Right. So the treatment actually, we have many dot points. Only one of them is about January 6th. And we are not specifically mentioning Donald Trump. And then we haven't tested. We could, but many other the dimensions about the U.S. democracy. I guess people don't know much about those like the voter registration or early voting, and then many of the issues that are concerning for those who want to protect the democracy, maybe except just the violence in January 6th. So our interpretation is that they didn't know much about, and then maybe they thought, wow, this is not January 6th, but many things are happening in the United States. I think that's the reason why we found strong, consistent, and highly significant effects. The second one, we're still thinking, okay? But if this could be a major contribution, but also controversial, because we are saying favorable attitude influenced by U.S. democratic backsliding, but no policy consequences. That could mean a lot to scholars of international relations, but also the policymakers. But we didn't ask that question in other European countries because we added to in study 2 and then study 3. And then study 3 in particular, the India, Japan, South Korea. And then South Korea, Japan, India, this may be our constraint. I mean, the scope condition may be Asia Pacific, right? And then also the issues are changing. Right, and then so I'm preparing a lot of experiments in Japan, and then also with like your collaborators in Japan, and so many people in Asia Pacific are interested in the Taiwan crisis issues, as Yusaku and many others. And then given this finding, I will add policy relevant questions in all of these experiments because we want to know not just the attitude, but something more specific to the policies. So for example, Ishiba Shigeri became the new prime minister. The first thing that he mentioned is that we need Asian NATO. Okay? And then US and many countries are quite negative, but given his expertise in security policies, the foreign policies is going to be the major issues in coming months and coming years. And how much people react to his proposal, and how much Japanese people are willing to cooperate with the United States is an issue that we want to study. And then how much image of the United States is relevant or not relevant. So I don't have a good answer to that. First, we need to study in other countries, but also even within East Asian countries, I think I want to do more data collection before making a huge claim that policy soft power doesn't matter. Yeah.
Here. So I have a question about interpretation. So it may be outside the research design, but is democratic value or democracy is soft power or hard power? I'm wondering it because background thinking about the US history, the kind of the reason or the justification of the war has been included democracy as their reason to cause the war. And I was wondering for some countries, maybe reading the US, maybe some people might think democracy means war for the US context or not. And maybe that will be the follow-up question to him about the policy preferences. And I was wondering how you connect those two ideas as a, how do you define the soft power, democracy as soft power?
So I think your question is beyond the literature of soft power and international status, I think more relevant to the democratic peace theory. Right? And then which, of course, Professor Mike Thoms here has wrote an influential paper. And then I'm working on some projects to re-examine Mike Thoms. and then democracy, the people, at least in the United States, when people are given information that that certain country is not democracy, compared to the country that is democracy, they are more likely to say we should attack this country. That's I say is essentially the democratic peace theory. But back to the Asian context, this is a project I'm working with Rikio Inoue, PhD student at Princeton University. We noticed, actually, I wanted to get some comments from you once we finish this paper, but democratic peace literature, and then there are some growing number of empirical research, but this empirical research about democratic peace tends to focus on whether or not your country should attack another country, democracy or not. But if you read the broader democratic peace literature, another important element is whether your country wants to support this country or that country. And this support is conditional on democracy. And I think about Ukraine, Israel, and then East Asia. And then when Taiwan is attacked, Taiwan is democracy, then China is not democracy. Does this matter? That is not much discussed. So we are saying that the democratic peace has another element, which is the democratic solidarity. And we are preparing some experiments on this. So not about soft power, but this is the reason. And then pretest after pretest actually suggests democratic bonus exists. But when they see trade-off, one is democracy, another one is non-democracy. But when they see the trade-off like democracy, but not Christian dominant country, Christian dominant country, but not democracy, this democracy bonus disappears. So the identity matters. That's actually preliminary findings. We can discuss more later. Yes.
Hello, I'm Sana. I'm a East Asian Studies student here, and I study soft power and democratic backsliding, so it's very interesting.
Yes.
I had two questions. One is about the research, and then one is a broader question.
Yes.
The first question was, so for this research, you focused on the US, but I was thinking about how would the research look different if it focused on like perhaps a country that I guess like has less international presence, like for example, Japan or South Korea. I think like in this one, when you focused on like India, Japan, South Korea, for example, it was like to what extent are you willing to make trade-offs? But perhaps if you focus on Japan, for example, it's not, maybe if you ask the US audiences, they might not see it how much are you willing to take that trade-off because you need less international presence. But then it's also, I think, Japan and Korea has soft power. So my first question is, how would the research will look different? And then the second question was, I'm trying to write my thesis on democratic backsliding in Japan and Korea. So would you say that there's democratic backsliding in Japan?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Two good questions.
Yeah.
Okay. I do international relations research, but I'm also the comparativist. So as I mentioned, I have been studying what people around the world think about the US. But as a Japanese person who also studied comparative politics, I also think that what people outside like Japan think about Japan. Okay, and then particularly the United States. So it's definitely worth studying, doing something similar to understand what European people, Australian people, Korean people, American people think about develop the image of Japan, and then how much people's policy preferences towards Japan are influenced by some positive image, maybe J-pop, K-pop. And then I'm half seriously with my colleague preparing another new research, which is Shohei Ohtani. Okay, seriously, he's actually the Taiwanese, and then Shohei Ohtani is such a big figure in Taiwan as well, and Korea as well. Okay, how much his presence in the media actually changed people's attitude toward Japan? It's not a trivial question, particularly when that actually affects the policy preferences. Okay, so I'm glad to know that you're working on that project. Now, the democratic backsliding in Japan, I can give another talk about this. And then just briefly, I don't know much about South Korea, the democratic backsliding in South Korea, but the democratic backsliding in Japan, I've been saying, I haven't written anything, but PhD student at Yale, Colin, what's his last name? Is working on relevant research. But my view of Japanese way of democratic backsliding is actually media control. Okay, and then shockingly, Shinzo Abe was assassinated. Okay, and then when Shinzo, believe or not, when Shinzo Abe was assassinated, Japan has 5 major newspapers: Asahi, Yomiuri, Sankei, Mainichi, Nikkei. Every single newspaper, okay, had exact same headline. Okay, worldwide, but font size exactly the same, no change. Okay, and then I even checked the local newspapers, prefecture level newspapers, almost all of them exactly the same. Okay, then probability that each individual newspaper decide the headline. Okay, if they independently decide. Okay, this likelihood that all of most of these newspapers use the exact same headline is almost 0. Okay, so this is definitely something strange is happening between the government and the media. Okay, so then this student at Yale is actually doing massive data collection, the news coverage, and then there are some change. So the newspaper becoming converging, again the relationship between media and the government are also changing. And the newspaper don't report, the government don't want them to report. Okay. So that's, I think, the potentially interesting and important democratic backsliding. That's my view.
What about social media?
Social media, I don't think like the rise of populism or the kind of thing is not growing. But that's actually another PhD student at the University of Toronto is working on, Jia Zhou. Yeah, why populism is not growing. But again, her focus is more the organizational strengths of the liberal democratic parties across the entire nation. But that could be related to the media control.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very interesting project, and I'd like to go back to a point on identity that you mentioned in passing. I mean, it's a very well designed and well executed and very clear finding. As you said, your hypotheses are fairly straightforward. It's not puzzle basically, right? So can you make your questions more interesting? At least, for me, then, I mean, can you identify certain conditions under which backsliding is perfect on soft power and international status. Okay, for example, because yourself is basically they're all democratic countries, right? I mean, India you can debate, but still by and large, they're all democratic countries. So would you expect, for example, the same findings if you do surveying in non-democratic societies? That's one thing comes to my mind. The other one, maybe make it more interesting, if we can compare, countries, they are experiencing their own democratic backsliding versus not. Because like South Korea, I mean, I've been arguing for this for many years. Like South Korea has been undergoing their own democratic backsliding, and some European countries as well. So then maybe their citizen may be able to identify what's happening in their own country with what's happening in the United States. So that might be also very fascinating way to look at. So if I can push a little more, I don't know, study 6 or 7. So trying to identify certain important conditions under which your two hypotheses hold. So once again, democratic versus autocratic society, or those undergoing their own democratic backsliding versus not. So I mean, those may be more interesting than very straightforward hypothesis that.
I think that's definitely
I think that's
interesting project. And then when it we only focused on European countries and important allies for the United States. But yes, definitely, ideally, we should also focus on non-allies, the countries that are not necessarily the democracies, and how much the same information have different effects.
Or they may not care.
They may not care. Right? So that's also another thing. But at the same time, as I mentioned in yesterday's workshop, some of those democratic countries actually don't even know China's repression in Hong Kong and other countries due to some media control. So when they are giving information, wow, interesting thing is happening in the United States. In US is really bad. Right? So unlike, back to your point, they may not know. So the treatment may actually work in a different way, maybe strong effects. But that's something definitely interesting. And then my case selection is kind of ad hoc. Initially about the refugee resettlement countries, and I did a pre-test in Asian countries. But the Naoki Egami at Princeton University and with his team is proposing a new statistical methods to do multi-site experiments. Okay? More and more people are doing experiments in multiple countries. But how to choose those countries? Okay? And then how we adjust the results and how they pool the results is becoming a really interesting methodological discussion. So theoretically driven case selection combined with a multi-site experiment is definitely an interesting avenue to do more research. And then, as you mentioned, their own country's democratic backsliding, information given, compared to the US democratic backsliding, relative effects. That's definitely another interesting research that someone can work on.
So yeah, because my questions are related to professionals. So what caught my eyes from your comparative experiment findings was in the case of New Zealand. Yeah, New Zealand was included both in your study 1 and study 2. But as I remember, study 1, there is a treatment effects.
Yes.
But in study 2, in New Zealand, the same country didn't show a treatment effects, which means that maybe domestic something can be working there, even though the same treatment were given.
Thanks for noting this. Because we actually did a lot of things in this study, but focusing on if you read the pre-registration, we say we do a lot of things. But at least for this paper, we focus on just the main part. But thanks for noticing this New Zealand. But in New Zealand, actually, when we were fielding the survey, right in the middle, US Secretary of State visited. And then discussed about whether or not the New Zealand should join AUKUS. So that there should be certain New Zealand specific context because the survey was fielded when the US leader was there. So another thing we are doing just before and just after, and how much the attitude change. And then we don't yet have a clear results. And then I only did just the preliminary results, but that could be another small short research note because it's so rare to do a study and then a leader actually visited and then talked about the questions that we are actually estimating. Yeah, so the New Zealand specific, like policy results, the only New Zealand, the negative and statistical significant, but that may be due to the New Zealand specific context. Yes.
And my name is Yusaku Kim, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at APRA. I'm an economist too, so I was a little bit interested in your experimental design. I think so. What interested me was that basically your treatment was the information about U.S. democracy,
Yes.
Right? And I think this also seems like a form of nudge, which is a topic of behavioral economics.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, in connection to political science, I was wondering if this information convenience or nudge could be used more widely to form U.S. favorability or image or soft power. And I think this connects to the media coverage that you mentioned yesterday. I was wondering if you also looked into how media coverage affects in different countries U.S. favorability and soft power.
So yes, I have done many relevant studies showing the certain information and then how it's nudge, right? The bit of information about the U.S. and how that actually changed people's attitude toward the United States. And Alexander is here, but we wrote a paper together when he was an undergraduate student at Dartmouth College, how information about U.S. policy conditional on whether or not mentioning the Trump changed people's attitude toward the United States in Japan. And what we found is essentially people react to the content of the policy, but not necessarily the messenger. So there is a big debate in the literature of political communications, whether the message sender or the message content, which one matters most. But we did this in the context of this international foreign public opinion, US, Japan, and then found the messengers, even Trump didn't have a strong effect. So there are many studies like this. And then also thanks for mentioning the media. I just recently published another paper with another former undergraduate students, also at Stanford, KCV, PhD student, some of you may know, PhD student at Stanford. So we worked on the project together in the context of COVID. Okay? And then we did, so early in the COVID, you may not remember, but Russia actually helped the United States, gave donations and medical equipment to the United States, Italy, and other countries, saying from Russia with love, right? And then that was covered in the US news media. Okay? And then we did the content analysis of the US news media about Russia's support for the United States. Some of the newspapers reported as it is, okay? Russia did this. But others media said Russia did this, but there should be a hidden motive. Okay? And then we proposed sincere and insincere hypotheses and media frames saying that Russia sincerely wanted to help US and insincerely there is a certain hidden motive. And then we showed the different results. People are much more strongly opposed to reducing the sanctions against Russia when they are exposed to the information that Russia actually want US to change the policy preferences. That's a new paper published this year from Political Behavior. So I'm definitely interested in how much information given by the foreign countries through the media change people's attitude. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Yusaku, for the fantastic presentation. There was a lot going on. There are 3 studies, different countries, different time.
Yeah.
And after lunch, it's pretty far away from here. Follow the results quite closely. But so study 1 is important for you because that established the impact of negative image of the US on the US's favorability and
international status. Yes.
I forgot what the results of the study 2 were. But
study 1, 2, study 3, all essentially the same.
okay, so the study 3, right? You looked at India, Japan, South
Korea, yes.
That also had evidence supporting your negative affecting.
Yes.
So then I'm just wondering, do you need study 1 in this paper? This is in the spirit of turning this into a paper.
Yeah.
You have that in study 3 alone to establish.
Yeah.
Why do you need study 1? That kind of is a corroborative evidence that that applies this story, this hypothesis is supported in other things as well.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering if the paper might work better if you focus on these three.
That's interesting.
And it's at the same time, 3 countries, a limited scope. And in that, if you choose that path, this goes back to the first comment about soft power. Because I felt uneasy as soon as you started talking about soft power without kind of defining it. So I agree with the first comment entirely in that. So you show that image matters. Well, negative information matters for the image of a country, but it doesn't actually shape the behavior.
Policy preferences,
Policy preferences, right? And the whole thing about soft power is about how favorability or preference for a certain country might actually help that country influence policy of another country without using force, without using coercion, right? So you're showing that that's not the case, as the first commenter pointed out, right? So I think that's an interesting path. And if you focus on soft power, right, and then just present study 3, and then start with that. And here I'm going to suggest study 4 and 5 and 6 of project advance. But this analysis demonstrated that negative image of a country does not undermine what the US's soft power, right? But soft power is more, that's the flip side of soft power argument, but the soft power is more about how positive image of a country actually helps. The image in the case of positive image of the US helps US shape policy preferences of other countries, policymakers, right? So if you have study 4 or 5, where you put the vignette would have positive information, some positive pieces of information about the US, and then see if that would move public policy preferences in a direction that aligns with US policy preferences. You couple those two, and then you have a very powerful paper on soft power.
Thank you so much. So that's quite interesting, and two interesting points. So the first one, why do I need to show study 1 and study 2? So this is study 3 only, 3 countries, and then all the main variables are there. And then I made this figure around 9 a.m. today for the purpose of this presentation. Sorry for the delay in submitting the PowerPoint slides, but then I saw, oh, this could be interesting, and this may be in delivering our messages clearly. So I sent this figure to my collaborators, and then said, well, we have this paper, but it maybe was focusing on another paper, just focusing on 3 countries, and then talk much more of the policies. So that could be a direction to go. If we are unsuccessful in publishing a paper using study 1 and study 2, this may be more interesting to read. And then we can always say that policy study 1, study 2, essentially similar results. But study 3, most convincing, comprehensive, because we ask more specific policy questions. So thanks for your suggestions. Another one. So I briefly mentioned that in this long journey of investigating international public opinion in the United States, Ben Goldsmith and I focused on 2003 in the US, in the world, and then how much favorable, unfavorable attitude toward the United States around the world actually changed the policy behavior of countries, including sending or not sending troops to Iraq. Okay, and then we found some change in the policy behavior, the aggregated, the observed outcomes at the level of the country. Okay, and then we used not experiment but more observational data. Okay, and then that's our initial paper suggesting that soft power is likely to have some power consequences. But another thing we could do is doing something similar. Now, doing experiment could be difficult, but the Gallup World Poll and the Pew Research Center has asked questions about attitude of the US for many years. So for example, Gallup World Poll asked that question since 2006 in 140 to 160 countries. Pew Research Center also asked similar question in 20 to 60 countries. And that I actually mentioned to you, but I actually compiled all of these data, and then there are lots of missing values. Sometimes some Gallup World Poll didn't ask question in this country, Pew Research Center didn't ask the question in that particular country. So lots of missing data, but I actually merged all of them, and I added tons of country year specific variables, and I did so-called multiple imputation, and then I generated estimated level of support and favorable, unfavorable attitude toward like 120 countries in each year since like 2005. So I have that particular cross-national time series balanced panel data with uncertainty estimate. But I actually have never published this. And I did this, but I didn't do anything. But it seems that just showing this data could be a contribution. And then also, because this is a country and year specific, and then we can also measure some decisions made by by these countries. Whether these decisions, for example, UN voting, how much their UN voting is consistent with the voting in the United States. Okay, how much US-led global initiatives they agreed to join. Okay, so those policy behavior may be influenced by positive or negative attitudes. So that for that purpose, my cross-national missing value imputed data may be useful. So that's another thing I can do. So thanks for your suggestion.
We will have one more.
Yes.
So versions of my questions were asked, but I'll narrow down to one thing. So, but I will say, echoing Georg's question before, that it did occur, especially when you're talking about India versus the other two cases, for instance. There could be an effect, much like people's prior expectations of what they know of the US, of whether they're in a backsliding country themselves, if not then seeing that as determinative. So that would be one side thing. But the larger question I had was, it's not just looking at Japan or Korea, for instance, but more broadly, this may not be something your data can answer, but more what your expectations going into the project. Is what you're measuring a take on the US specifically or on backsliding? In other words, do countries, because a lot of the European countries you're looking at also have effects of backsliding, Sweden, the rise of the right and so forth. So, if we were then to flip the scale, just to flip the mirror and ask, do countries have lower expectations or lower trust of countries that they see to be backsliding or in flux in terms of the regime? Or is this something that's another version of US exceptionalism that's unique to the US because of its specific place and the character of its soft power projection?
I have never thought about this, but that's actually quite interesting. So at least in this experiment, we use US democratic backsliding, but we didn't test whether this is reacting to the US backsliding or the change in the democracy itself. That I think is really interesting. And that I think has a huge implication to understand international relations. Because the US at least tried to promote democracy. Okay, as I mentioned, and then when the US president meets other democratic leaders, they emphasize the democracies. But people may actually have their attitude toward the democracy itself may be changing, okay, in a positive and negative way. I don't know. Maybe world value surveys may have some relevant questions, but that's also interesting. And then I don't have a good answer to this, but if like Japan, I don't think many people think that the Japanese democracy is backsliding. So in such country, the US prime may have a strong effect, but in other countries where democratic backsliding becomes a huge issue, they may think that, oh, it's common issues. Right? So the same information about the US may not have a similar effect. So that's also something really interesting. So study 7 registered. Thank you so much. Yeah.